Welcome one and all, I'm Alexis, aka The Sloth Reader, and I'm here today to recommend some books set in Africa. This is by no means a super encompassing list. I only have 5 books to recommend, but there are 5 books I really enjoyed and I think other people could really enjoy as well. I would eventually like to do more recommendations for books set in other continents. I definitely can do ones for books set in Europe, and I feel like I'm very close to being able to do ones about recommendations for books set in South America, because I have read quite a few of those as well. But in general, I think I would like to read a lot more books set in other countries, and as I'm foraying a little bit more into literary fiction, I definitely feel like that could happen. I feel like I am reading more in that variety, but these are books set in Africa. I just feel like I wanted to make this recommendation video in case any of you were looking for books set in Africa, so here we are. The first one I'm going to mention is probably the one internationally most well known. It was one I studied back in school, and that is Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. And this takes place in Nigeria, kind of at the age when colonialism was kind of being introduced into the country. And it basically follows this one village, but it also follows a man named Okonkwo, and it's kind of about him being this prominent figure in his village and him kind of losing his grip on his village, on his family, on himself in an age of colonialism. This is a very well-known book. Like I said, internationally, Chinua Achebe is a very well-known author, especially for writing about Nigeria in an age of colonialism. Things Fall Apart is a very beautiful novel. It's not that long, it's a very quick read, and it's a lot about how colonialism affects not only the village and the country, but how it also can affect the individual. And it's about Okonkwo's, slowly losing himself to the changes around him, and it's just really phenomenal. If you haven't read this yet and you're at all interested, I highly recommend it because it's just really good. The next one I'm going to mention is probably the most well-known here on BookTube, and that is Homegoing by Ya Jossi. This is another novel that is absolutely beautiful. This takes place in Ghana, and it basically follows 2 sisters, one who marries a wealthy white man on the coast and one who is sold into slavery, and then it proceeds to follow their family lines over the next 200 to 300 years. And it's about the ways in which their lives completely ended up differently and their families completely ended up differently, but it's also about how their families intertwine, and it's about how, despite one of them seeming like maybe they're in the worst situation, not everybody's having a great life compared to the others. I mean, there's definitely parts in this book that are heartbreaking to read, especially as you're going through the one sister's line as her family is dealing with the American slave trade, and they're going through, segregation and Jim Crow, and it's heartbreaking to read. But there are aspects of the other sister's story in Ghana that are equally heartbreaking to read. But this book is really beautiful, and if you are the kind of person who loves multi-generational stories, this is one that I feel like you can't miss, because it's exactly what multi-generational stories kind of strive to be. And like I said, this follows like 200 to 300 years of these 2 families, and you only get about 25 to 35 pages with each member, but you get so attached to them in the short amount of time. Like, I can still remember a lot of their names in this book, and I read it I think 2, maybe 3 years ago. But that's just how profound of a book it is. And yeah, this is a very popular book on BookTube. I would be surprised if most of you haven't read it, or at least haven't heard of it, but I highly recommend this one as well. The next one I'm going to read is one I recently read for Pride Month, and that is Under the Udala Trees by Chinelo Okparanta. And this follows our main character, Ijeoma, as she's kind of growing up in Nigeria as well. And it's about kind of her being a queer woman and the experiences that she has being a queer woman in Nigeria. This very heavily deals with the religious culture of Nigeria and kind of how Ijeoma's relationship with religion kind of wavers and develops over the course of this book, because, she wants to turn to religion as a source of comfort, but all around her and the religious culture in Nigeria is telling her that religion damns her for being queer. And there's just so many moments in this story where you're seeing Ijeoma fall in love and you're experiencing these loves with her, but you're seeing the effect that it has on her and the effect that it has on her family in this religious climate. And it is a tough book to read, especially if you're part of the queer community, but I said this in my June wrap-up and I'll repeat it here again. I think it's a very important novel for that reason, because I feel like we don't get so many books from the queer community in Africa in general, and so for that reason this is a very important novel to read, because it does tell a story that I feel like we don't get that often. The next one I'm going to mention is actually a play. It's actually my personal favorite play, and that is Master Harold and the Boys by Ethel Fugard, and this is takes place in South Africa during apartheid. Ethel Fugard is a South African author, and this basically follows two characters, and it takes place in the span of an afternoon, and it follows our main character Hallie, whose mother owns this cafe, and it's about him and the relationship he has with Sam, who is a black man who works for his mother at the cafe. And basically Sam has always been a father figure to Hallie, despite Sam being black and Hallie being white, and it's kind of because Hallie doesn't really have a good relationship with his own father, and so it's about the relationship that he and Sam have, and the differences between them and the different ways that they view each other on two different sides of apartheid. And it's all kind of just this one big analogy for apartheid in South Africa. But it's 60 pages, it's very short, you can read it in a day, but it's beautiful. And so many of the moments in this play are so profound. I love this play immensely. I think it's a beautiful story. Again, it's a huge analogy for apartheid in South Africa, but I definitely think it's worth the read, especially because it's just so short. And the last book I'm going to mention is another one I read this year, and that is Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo. This book is beautiful. I totally understand why this was on so many of my friends' favorite books of last year list, because it's incredible. This follows our main character Yejide and her husband, and basically it follows Yejide and her husband as they're trying to conceive a child, and they're frequently unsuccessful, and Yejide believes it's because she's infertile, and so she basically tries all of these things to get pregnant, and it starts to have a strain on her relationship with her husband. And because she's unable to get pregnant, her husband's family actually forces him to marry another woman, and it's kind of about how that shift in their dynamic and how the introduction of this other woman kind of sets them on a path. And it's kind of about how that affects the relationship and how it affects Yejide as a person and her mental state, and it kind of all goes from there. This book is a wild roller coaster. When I went into this book, I had no idea what I was really getting into, because I purposefully never picked this up because I didn't think I would like it, because I was like, oh, that just doesn't sound like something I'd be into. But because so many people I know had raved about it, I was like, okay, I'll pick it up. And it was incredible. I was so emotional through so many parts of this book. I was angry, I was sad, I was ecstatic, I was shocked, and it literally took me all over the place. And it's such an incredible, one-of-a-kind novel, and I highly recommend this one. I really think you should read every book on this list, because I think they're all just really phenomenal and totally worth the read. But Stay With Me is probably the one that's going to take you on the biggest roller coaster if that's what you're looking for. Alrighty guys, so that was my little recommendation video for some books set in Africa. Like I said, I would like to every couple of months maybe pick a different continent and try to do that. Like I said, I definitely think I can recommend some South American books pretty soon, so maybe stay on the lookout for that. I would absolutely love to know your recommendations for books set in Africa. Like I said, I would like to read more books that are set around the world. So if you have any good recommendations, please let me know. If you like what I do, upload videos on Monday, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, and I'll see you guys soon with another one.